Well, this week, RedBridge Group has turned its focus to the major party leaders and their popularity ahead of that looming federal election I just referenced. For more, I'm joined by RedBridge Group Director Simon Welsh. Simon, what have you been delving into this week and what have you come up with?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think we're sort of really entering now a danger period. I mean, we've been saying that for a while, but I think the pointiness of the danger period for the Albanese government is really starting to come home. So what we're seeing, particularly in those sort of stressed suburban electorates, what we're seeing is this sense of no policy agenda, no direction from the government. We talk to people about what they're hearing, about the government, its direction, its agenda for the country, and we draw blanks. You might occasionally sort of get a mention of, oh, they said something, they're going to do some big stuff around housing, but it's very quickly qualified by, yeah, but we don't actually expect that they're going to do anything on that because it's, one of those big government promises, lots of big numbers, but you don't actually see anything. So the cupboard in that sort of policy agenda space is bare. Now, that's part of the problem, of course, but it's not the real sort of emerging pointiness that we're sort of interested in at the moment. What's coming is you can kind of get away with inaction or even mistakes and bad decisions, depending on how the voters attribute the cause or the blame for those things. So, for example, what we've seen around particularly Anthony Albanese and Labor up to date in this government term has been, he seems like a decent bloke, inherited difficult economic times, unprecedented, unpredictable, insert your adjective here. And that kind of makes it forgivable. It's sort of externalised it and sort of taken it out of their control. What we're now seeing, particularly on those that were sort of sitting softly on the Labor pile, so this is not, Liberal voters, this is not Greens voters, this is those sitting softly on the Labor pile in those suburban seats, is that attribution is changing from circumstances to a trait of this government. They are unwilling to do things. It's gone from decent bloke caught up in circumstances to, hey, maybe these people are actually unwilling to take the action that's required to improve our circumstances, cost of living, quality of life, all those things. And key to it is that they don't seem to want to pick a fight, that they won't stand up, they won't have the fight that people think is necessary. So people talk about, why won't they stand up to the energy companies? Why won't they stand up to the supermarkets? The stuff around the inquiry into the supermarkets is lost in the imagination. Like, that's gone, that's disappeared, that's been forgotten in the imagination of the voters that we're talking to.
Wow.
And even stuff like the gambling legislation is seen as, well, here's another opportunity for them to stand up to big corporate interests, and they won't do it.
So the feeling generally is, Simon, is to the Labor government, okay, we want to support you, but do something.
Yeah. We want to support you, do something, but doing something means that you've got to pick some kind of fight here. The situation is so dire that continual sort of little incremental, softly kinds of reforms and band-aids, that's the word that we hear all the time, isn't going to cut it. We want to see action, whether it's on corporate taxes or gambling, whatever it is, do something that stands up to these sorts of interests that are making our lives more difficult. Because on the other side, they've got Peter Dutton, who has, if you take nuclear, for example, picked a fight. And we often hear,
is he being marked up for that?
Well, we often hear people will say to us, look, I might not agree with that particular policy, but at least he's putting something out there. At least he's offering up something that's a bit different and shows a sort of strength of conviction. And that's really dangerous territory for a government when you've got people making those attributions about character, about traits of the government, about characteristics of the government, because that then becomes predictive of what this government will do in the future.
I think as well, Simon, this is more a comment from me rather than looking for reaction from you or affirmation or anything like that. But, I think Labor broadly believe that Peter Dutton is unelectable, but they have not faced up to what's happening in the focus groups that you're talking about and in the published surveys as well. Shows that he has made up ground on them. Yes, it just puts Labor into minority territory, but isn't this a classic case of Labor really underestimating their opponent?
I think so. Certainly in those suburban electorates. He's not unelectable in those electorates by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, he's got all sorts of trouble back in Teal electorates and some of those now sort of progressive leaning, once liberal base kind of territories. Yeah, absolutely. But in those outer suburban territories, I mean, you'd still be amazed at the number of people who don't know who he is. I mean, first of all, so a lot of that negativity hasn't landed yet. What all they're seeing is an alternative to a government that, as I say, whose trait is to do nothing. But they are making mistakes, and this is the thing. I think as they pivot to those outer suburban electorates, because they haven't been long-term liberal kind of territory battlegrounds, they start making mistakes because they don't know how to talk to those electorates. So, for example, the stuff around the Palestinian refugees over the past week does not play well in very diverse outer suburban electorates. And I'm not just talking about Muslim Australians. I'm talking about recent migrants of all varieties that sort of see the dog whistle in that kind of statement. So they've got lessons to learn. It's not going to be easy for them out there. They've got to learn how to talk to these electorates. But he's certainly, for a big bulk of those electorates, he's not unelectable in the sense that, absolutely, that I think Labor's talking about.
Simon, always fascinating. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.